apologize to her. "I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're asking me to." I said apologize. To her. Now. 14 seconds of silence in the lobby of the Hanul Grand Hotel. Nora Morgan, floor manager, standing with her mouth open and nothing coming out. Maxine Burns, housekeeper, standing behind the man who had just turned every assumption in the building inside out. The guests at the front desk pretending not to watch. The staff she worked with every day frozen against the marble pillars. And Beomgyu Seoul, 24 years old, chairman of a logistics empire worth more than the hotel and the block it sat on, speaking so quietly that Nora had to lean forward to hear her own destruction. What happens when the woman they dress down in public turns out to be the only person in the room who knows exactly who everyone really is? Stay with this one, because that moment in the lobby is only the middle of the story. The beginning is a subway control room in Bukchon Hanok village, in the hush just before sunrise, where Maxine discovered that someone had been living her old life without her, using her name, taking credit for the reputation she had spent years building and walked away from. And the ending does not go where you think it will. If this story touched you, drop a comment and tell me about the person who saw the real you before anyone else did. She is not alone if she exists. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. And I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. This is how it started, 3 weeks earlier. Maxine Burns had been awake since 4:17 in the morning, and by the time she pushed her housekeeping cart down the 7th floor hallway of the Hanul Grand Hotel, the muscles between her shoulder blades had settled into a low, familiar burn. She was 34 years old, 5'6", born in Ferguson, in the shadow of the shipyard where her father had worked until the day his back gave out. She had come to Seoul 14 months ago with 2 suitcases and a name she no longer used, and she had learned to move through the hotel the way water moves through pipe, quietly, invisibly, arriving wherever she was needed without anyone noticing the journey. The Hanul Grand was the kind of place that expected its staff to be furniture. Polished, silent, present only when required. Maxine had cleaned 11 rooms since her shift began. She had 9 more before she could clock out, eat something that was not from the break room vending machine, and sleep for 6 hours before doing it again. Double shifts, back to back, because the rent on her 1 room in Mapo did not care that her feet ached or that she had once stood at the front of a dining room in Atlanta where a single tasting menu cost more than a week of her current wages. That was another life. She did not think about it. Room 714 had been occupied by a guest who had stripped the bed entirely and left the sheets in a pile by the bathroom door, which was considerate. Room 716 had been occupied by a guest who had somehow gotten red wine on the ceiling, which was not. Maxine cleaned both without complaint. She had a system. Bathroom first, then linens, then surfaces, then floors. 43 minutes per room if nothing was broken. 38 if the guest had been tidy. She moved through the work with the kind of efficiency that came from repetition and from something older. Something she had carried with her from the years when her job had been to remember 200 faces and know which ones wanted to be greeted by name and which ones wanted to be left alone. She did not think about that either. The 7th floor was quiet at this hour. Most of the long-term guests were out. The suites at the end of the hall had been empty for 3 days, awaiting a corporate booking that kept getting pushed back. Maxine had just unlocked 718 when she heard footsteps behind her, and she knew from the rhythm of them, from the particular click of low heels on marble tile, exactly who was coming before she turned around. Nora Morgan walked the way she did everything, with the brittle precision of someone who had clawed her way to floor manager and intended to hold that ground with her fingernails if necessary. She was American, like Maxine. Late 40s. Blonde hair pinned back so tightly it looked painful. She had been at the Hanul Grand for 7 years, and she ran the housekeeping staff the way a drill sergeant runs a barracks, except a drill sergeant usually had the decency to yell in private. Burns. Nora stopped 3 feet away. She was holding a clipboard, which was never a good sign. "You were late clocking in yesterday." Maxine kept her face neutral. The subway was delayed. I was at my first room by 5:02. Your shift starts at 5 o'clock. Yes, ma'am. 2 minutes is 2 minutes. Nora made a note on her clipboard. I'm documenting it. Maxine did not point out that she had stayed an extra hour and a half the night before to cover for a colleague who had gone home sick. She did not point out that 2 minutes, in a job where she regularly worked 12-hour days without overtime, was the kind of infraction that existed only because Nora needed infractions to exist. She had learned, in 14 months, that pointing things out to Nora Morgan accomplished nothing except making the next shift worse. Understood, Maxine said. Nora's eyes moved over her, looking for something else to document. The cart, the uniform, the way Maxine stood. There was a particular kind of person who needed to find fault the way other people needed coffee, and Nora was that kind of person. Maxine had met versions of her in every job she had ever held. The difference was that in her old life, she had outranked them. The guest in 722 complained about streaks on the bathroom mirror, Nora said. That was your room. It had not been her room. It had been assigned to her on paper, but she had been pulled to the 9th floor that day to handle an emergency turnover, and the actual cleaning had been done by a trainee whose name Maxine did not know. She considered explaining this. She considered the look on Nora's face, the tightness around her mouth, the way her pen was already hovering over the clipboard. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again, Maxine said. Nora smiled. It was not a kind smile. See that you don't. She walked away, heels clicking, and Maxine stood in the hallway for a long moment before she pushed open the door to 718 and got back to work. This was her life now. 43 minutes per room, double shifts, a manager who documented 2-minute delays and blamed her for mirrors she had not touched. She had chosen this. She had walked away from Atlanta, from the reputation she had built, from the name that had opened doors, because she could not stay in a place where everyone knew what had happened and no one would let her forget it. Seoul was supposed to be a clean start, a place where no one knew Maxine Burns, where she could be invisible, where she could work and sleep and not think about the life she had left behind. It was working, mostly. She finished 718 in 41 minutes. She was halfway through 720 when she heard the commotion from the elevator bank, and she stepped into the hallway to see what was happening, because commotion at the Hanil Grand usually meant a VIP arrival, and VIP arrivals usually meant Nora would need bodies to stand at attention and look professional while rich people walked past without seeing them. But this was different. There were 6 men in dark suits coming out of the elevator, and they moved with the kind of coordinated efficiency that suggested training, not just employment. Security. Real security. Not the hotel's in-house team. They were flanking someone, and it took Maxine a moment to see past them to the figure at the center. He was younger than she expected. Mid-20s, maybe. Tall, lean, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body. His face was striking in the way that Korean beauty standards prized. Sharp jaw, clear skin, the kind of bone structure that photographers loved. But it was his expression that caught her attention. He was looking at the hallway the way she looked at a room before she cleaned it. Assessing. Cataloging. Taking in every detail and filing it somewhere behind those dark, watchful eyes. His gaze passed over her, and she felt it. Not the dismissive slide of a guest who did not register staff as people, but something more focused. He saw her. He saw the cart behind her and the uniform she was wearing and the way she was standing half in the doorway of 720, and for a fraction of a second his eyes stayed on hers. Then he was past, and his security was guiding him toward the suites at the end of the hall, and Maxine went back to work. She did not know who he was. She did not ask. She found out anyway because the hotel staff talked, and by the time she clocked out that night, the 7th floor was buzzing with the news. Beom Seoul, 24 years old, chairman of a logistics conglomerate that had automated half the country's last-mile package delivery. His company was worth billions. The hotel was worth less than one of his quarterly earnings reports. He had booked the corner suite for 3 weeks, paid in advance, and requested minimal staff contact. Minimal staff contact meant Maxine. Nora assigned her to his floor the next morning with a tight smile that suggested she considered it a punishment. The difficult guest. The one who did not want to be disturbed. The one whose complaints, if he made them, would land directly on whoever was responsible for his rooms. Maxine did not argue. She never argued. She cleaned his suite while he was out. She noticed things, because noticing things was what she did. The books on the desk were technical manuals, robotics, and supply chain optimization, with notes in the margins in handwriting so precise it looked printed. The closet held 7 identical suits and nothing else. There were no personal photographs, no souvenirs, no indication that the man who slept here had a life outside of work, except for one thing. On the nightstand, half hidden beneath a stack of contracts, there was a pair of leather work gloves. The kind delivery drivers wore. They were old, creased, worn soft from use. They did not belong in a suite that cost 4,200,000 a night. Maxine looked at them for a long moment. Then she finished cleaning, left the room exactly as she had found it, and did not mention the gloves to anyone. 3 days later, she saw him again. She was restocking her cart in the 7th floor supply closet when she heard voices in the hallway, and one of them was Nora's, pitched in the particular register she used when she was trying to impress someone important. Maxine stayed where she was. The closet door was half open, and she could see a slice of the corridor through the gap. Nora was standing in front of Billionaire Seoul, clipboard in hand, explaining something about housekeeping schedules with the kind of excessive detail that suggested she had no idea what he actually wanted to know. He was listening. His face revealed nothing. But his eyes kept drifting, scanning the hallway, and after a moment they found the supply closet, found the gap in the door, found Maxine standing perfectly still behind her cart of fresh linens. He looked at her for 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then he turned back to Nora and said, in a voice so quiet it barely carried, "The woman who cleans my suite. What is her name?" Nora blinked. "I'm sorry? Her name?" "That would be Burns, sir. Maxine Burns. Is there a problem? I can assign someone else if—" "No." He was already walking away, his security falling into step around him. "She stays." Nora stared after him with an expression Maxine had never seen on her face before. Confusion, maybe. Or the first faint stirring of something that might, in another person, have been fear. Maxine did not move until they were gone. Then she finished restocking her cart, pushed it out into the hallway, and got back to work, because that was what she did. That was all she knew how to do anymore. She did not let herself wonder why a man like Billionaire Seoul would bother to learn her name. She did not let herself think about the way he had looked at her, as if he already knew something about her that she had not told anyone. She just worked. The week that followed was quiet in the way a held breath is quiet. Maxine cleaned Billionaire Seoul's suite every morning at 9:15 after he left for whatever meetings filled his days. She learned the rhythm of his absence the way she had once learned the rhythm of a dining room, by observation and repetition, until she could predict within minutes when the hallway would empty and she could work undisturbed. He was precise. He left at 8:47 each morning and returned after 10:00 each night. His security rotated in shifts, but he was always alone when he walked through the door. She learned other things too. The stack of contracts on his desk changed daily, but the technical manuals stayed. The work gloves on the nightstand were moved sometimes, as if he picked them up and held them before bed. There was a single photograph tucked into one of the books, a delivery truck with a young man leaning against it, face obscured by shadow and a baseball cap. She did not look closely. She was not supposed to look at all. But she noticed. On the 4th day, she found a note on the desk. Handwritten, in that precise script she had come to recognize. It said, "The orchid needs less water Once a week is sufficient. She looked at the orchid on the windowsill. She had been watering it every other day, the way the hotel's plant care protocol required. She adjusted. On the 6th day, there was another note. The books on the nightstand are in a specific order. Please do not reorganize them. She had not reorganized them, but she understood. He was paying attention. He noticed when things were moved, when things were changed, when the careful arrangement of his temporary life was disturbed by hands that were not his own. She left a note of her own on the 7th day. She should not have. It was against protocol, against common sense, against every instinct that had kept her invisible for 14 months. But she did it anyway, because something in her could not help it. The note said, "The order of the books has not been changed since Tuesday. Someone else may have accessed the room." She left it on the desk, beneath his stack of contracts, and went back to work. That night, at 10:23, she was restocking the supply closet when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Not security. A single set of footfalls, unhurried, deliberate. She stayed where she was, half hidden behind the cart, and watched through the gap in the door as Seoul walked past. He stopped. He turned his head, just slightly, toward the closet. Toward her. He did not speak. He did not nod. But something in his expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, and then he continued walking, and the hallway was empty again. The next morning there was no note on the desk. There was something else instead. A book, set apart from the others. A worn paperback copy of a memoir by a restaurant owner in Lyon. Someone Maxine had read about years ago. Someone whose philosophy of hospitality she had studied when she was building her own career. The book was in French. There was no note attached, no explanation. It was simply there, waiting. She did not take it. She did not move it. She cleaned the room in 38 minutes and left everything exactly as she had found it. But she understood. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew who she had been, or he suspected, or he was testing something, reaching out across the professional distance that separated them to see if she would reach back. She did not reach back. She could not afford to. But she thought about it. Late at night, in her one-room apartment in Mapo, lying on the thin mattress that was the only furniture she had bothered to buy, she thought about the French book and the work gloves and the way his eyes had found her through the gap in the supply closet door. She thought about who she had been and who she was now, and the distance between those two women. And she did not sleep well. The lobby incident happened on a Tuesday. Maxine was not supposed to be in the lobby at all. Her shift was on the 7th floor, as always, but Nora had pulled her downstairs to cover for a colleague who had called in sick. A last-minute assignment. A simple task. Wipe down the display tables near the concierge desk, empty the trash receptacles by the elevator bank, and disappear back upstairs before anyone important noticed her. The lobby of the Hanul Grand was designed to make certain people feel powerful and other people feel small. It was all marble and glass and strategic lighting, a temple to the particular kind of wealth that expected to be worshipped. At 11 o'clock in the morning, it was full. Business travelers checking out, tour groups gathering for excursions, long-term guests crossing to the restaurant for brunch. And at the center of it all, standing near the front desk like she owned the building, Nora Morgan. Maxine saw her too late. She was wiping down the last display table, a tasteful arrangement of brochures and orchids, when Nora's voice cut across the lobby. "Burns." Maxine straightened. She did not turn around immediately. She finished the motion she was making, set down her cloth, and only then did she face her manager with the neutral expression she had perfected over 14 months of practice. Nora was holding a stack of papers. Her face was tight with the particular satisfaction of someone who has been waiting for this moment. "Come here." Maxine walked across the lobby. She was aware of the people watching. The front desk staff, the bellhops. A group of businessmen in expensive suits, paused mid-conversation. She kept her spine straight and her face calm and her hands folded in front of her, the way she had been trained to stand when receiving correction back in another life, when correction had been given quietly and professionally and never in front of an audience. Nora waited until Maxine was standing directly in front of her, close enough that the people nearby would hear every word. "Do you know what this is?" She held up the papers. Maxine recognized the format. Housekeeping incident reports. Guest complaint forms. Documentation of infractions, real and imagined. "I do not, ma'am." "This is a formal complaint from the guest in 814. He says his watch was moved. A 50 million won watch, Burns. Moved from where he left it to somewhere else entirely." Nora's voice was pitched to Carrie. "He's accusing housekeeping staff of tampering with his belongings. He's threatening to involve the police." Maxine's stomach dropped, but her face did not change. "I did not clean 814 this week. I was reassigned to the 7th floor. Your name is on the rotation." Nora waved the papers. "Right here. 814, your initials." "That rotation was changed 4 days ago. Mrs. Park should have... Are you telling me how to run my department?" The lobby had gone quiet. Not silent, but quiet in the way that happens when people are listening while pretending not to. Maxine could feel the eyes on her. The front desk staff, frozen at their stations. The businessmen, no longer pretending to have a conversation. 2 women in designer clothing, watching with the idle curiosity of people who had never been humiliated in public. "No, ma'am. Because it sounds like you're making excuses." Nora stepped closer. Her voice had not risen, but it had acquired a theatrical quality, as if she wanted to make sure everyone heard her clearly. "It sounds like you're trying to shift blame to your colleagues. It sounds like you think the rules don't apply to you, Burns." Maxine did not respond. There was nothing to say. The rotation had been changed. She had been nowhere near 814. But Nora had her initials on a piece of paper, and that was enough. "I'm documenting this incident." Nora was smiling now, that tight, satisfied smile that never reached her eyes. "And I'm putting you on notice. 1 more complaint, 1 more incident, and you're done. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Say it louder." Maxine's hands were trembling, very slightly, beneath her folded arms. She pressed them tighter. "I understand, ma'am." "Good." Nora looked around the lobby, at the watching faces, at the audience she had assembled. "You can go back to work now." Maxine turned. She walked across the lobby with her spine straight and her face blank and her hands still folded in front of her, because that was the only thing she could control. The walk to the elevator bank felt like it lasted a full minute. The marble floor was too bright. The glass walls showed her reflection, a woman in a housekeeping uniform moving toward the service corridor, and she did not look at herself. She did not look at anyone. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, and only when they closed behind her did she let herself breathe. She did not cry. She had stopped crying about things like this a long time ago. But she stood in that elevator, rising toward the 7th floor, and she let herself feel, for just a moment, the weight of what had just happened, the unfairness of it, the calculation behind it. Nora had chosen the lobby on purpose. She had waited for a moment when the hotel would be full of witnesses. She had made a public example of Maxine Burns, and there was nothing Maxine could do about it. This was her life now. She stepped off the elevator and walked toward the supply closet, and she did not notice, at first, that someone was standing at the end of the hallway. Seoul was alone. No security, no entourage. Just a man in a charcoal suit, standing very still near the door to his suite, watching her with an expression she could not read. She stopped. Her face was probably still flushed. Her hands were probably still shaking. She had no idea how long he had been there, or how much he had seen, or whether the lobby's glass walls had given him a clear view of her humiliation from 7 floors up. He did not speak. She did not speak. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then he turned, opened his door, and disappeared inside. Maxine stood in the hallway for a long moment after he was gone. Then she got her cart and went back to work. The next morning, there was a new note on his desk. It said, "The watch in 814 was never moved. The guest left it in his jacket pocket and forgot. He found it this morning. He is not pressing charges." Maxine read the note twice. Then she folded it, put it in her pocket, and finished cleaning the room. She did not know how Seoul had found out about the watch, or why he had bothered to tell her. She did not know what he wanted from her, or what he thought he saw when he looked at her with those dark, assessing eyes. But something had shifted. The distance between them, the careful professional separation she had been maintaining, had cracked. She was not sure what would happen when it broke entirely. That night, sleepless in her apartment, she opened her phone and did something she had promised herself she would never do again. She searched her own name. The results were immediate, and they did not make sense. There was a feature in a Seoul food magazine, dated 3 months ago. An interview with Maxine Burns, acclaimed hospitality consultant and former maitre d' of one of Atlanta's finest establishments. The photograph showed a woman Maxine had never seen before. Same age, same general coloring, but different features, different smile. The woman in the photograph was accepting an award at a restaurant opening. She was being quoted about her philosophy of service excellence. She was using Maxine's name and Maxine's credentials and Maxine's entire professional history, and she was doing it in the same city where Maxine had been scrubbing toilets for 14 months without anyone knowing who she really was. Someone had stolen her identity. Not her credit cards or her bank accounts. Something worse. Someone had stolen her reputation. The phone trembled in Maxine's hand. She scrolled further, finding more articles, more photographs, more evidence of a life being lived by someone who was not her. The woman had given speeches. She had consulted for hotel chains. She had built a career on Maxine's name, and no one in Seoul knew the difference because the real Maxine Burns was invisible now. A housekeeper. A ghost. She did not sleep at all that night. And in the morning, when she pushed her cart down the 7th floor hallway toward the suite of a man who seemed to see everything, she realized that her carefully constructed invisibility was about to fall apart. The only question was whether anyone would believe her when she tried to explain who she really was. The subway control room in Bukchon Hanok village was not supposed to be open to the public. Seoul had arranged access through channels Maxine did not ask about. What mattered was that she was standing in front of a wall of monitors at 5:47 in the morning, watching footage that proved she was not losing her mind. The woman on the screen was entering the Hanul Grand Hotel 2 months ago. She was wearing a designer dress and carrying a leather portfolio, and she was being greeted at the front desk by Nora Morgan herself. The timestamp was clear. The face was clearer. It was not Maxine's face. "Her name is Soo-yeon-an," Byung-gyu said. He was standing 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, watching the monitors with the same focused attention he gave to everything. She worked as a server at a hotel in Busan until 18 months ago. She moved to Seoul around the same time you did. Maxine did not ask how he had found this. She did not ask why he had bothered to look. She watched the footage cycle through different angles, different dates, and felt something cold and clarifying settle into her chest. Who hired her? That is the question. Byung-gyu touched a control panel and the footage shifted. A conference room at a different hotel. Soo-yeon-an, still wearing Maxine's identity like a borrowed coat, shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. His name is David Chen. He runs a hospitality consulting firm that has been trying to break into the Korean market for 3 years. He needed credentials. He needed a name that would open doors. He stole mine. He found someone willing to pretend to be you. Byung-gyu paused. The footage showed Chen and the impersonator leaving the conference room, and behind them, Holding the door was Nora Morgan. She has been his inside contact at the Haniul Grand. She receives a percentage of every consulting contract he signs. Maxine looked at Nora's face on the screen, the tight smile, the calculating eyes. She thought about 14 months of documented infractions and double shifts and public humiliations, and she understood finally why Nora had needed her to be invisible. Why Nora had needed her to stay small and silent and too exhausted to notice that someone else was living her life. "What do you want to do?" Beomgyu asked. The question was not casual. He was watching her the way he always watched her, with that focused attention that made her feel seen in ways she had spent 14 months avoiding. He had the power to destroy Nora Morgan. He had the resources to bury David Chen's consulting firm, to expose the impersonator, to make a single phone call that would end careers and reputations across 3 countries. She could see it in the way he stood, the calm certainty of a man who had dismantled larger obstacles than this before breakfast. But that was not what she wanted. "I want to meet her," Maxine said, face to face, before anything else happens. The meeting was arranged for 11 o'clock that morning. Beomgyu did not ask why. He simply made it happen, the way he made everything happen, with quiet efficiency and resources that seemed inexhaustible. The lobby of the Haniul Grand was full when Maxine walked through the front doors. She was not wearing her housekeeping uniform. She was wearing a dress she had kept in the back of her closet for 14 months. A simple black sheath that had cost a week's salary in her old life, and that fit her the same way it always had. Her hair was down, her shoulders were back. She walked across the marble floor like she owned it, because she had once known how to walk into rooms full of people who thought they were better than her and make them reconsider. Nora saw her first. The floor manager was standing near the front desk, and for a moment her face went completely blank, as if her brain could not process what she was seeing. Then recognition hit, and something else behind it. Fear. "Burns, what are you?" "Miss Morgan." Maxine stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be heard, not close enough to be touched. "I believe you're expecting someone." The elevator doors opened, and Soo-yeon-an stepped into the lobby. She was wearing the same designer dress from the surveillance footage. She was carrying the same leather portfolio. And she was looking at Maxine with the particular horror of someone who has just realized that the person she has been pretending to be is standing directly in front of her. "Miss Burns," Maxine said, and she let the name hang in the air between them. Or should I say, Miss An. The lobby had gone quiet. The same terrible quiet as before, when Nora had humiliated her in front of everyone. But this time Maxine was not the one being watched. This time, she was the one watching. Soo-yeon-an's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I know you've been using my credentials," Maxine said. Her voice was calm, level. The voice she had used for years in the dining room of a restaurant where a single word could make or break an evening. "I know about the consulting contracts. I know about the speeches, and I know about David Chen." At the name, Soo-yeon flinched. "There's a man with him, isn't there?" Maxine continued. "His new business partner. Tall, gray hair, American accent. Goes by the name William Harper." Soo-yeon's face answered the question before her mouth could. "His real name is William Hartley," Maxine said. "He was banned from every serious restaurant in Atlanta 8 years ago after he assaulted a server at a private event. I know because I'm the one who identified him to the police. I'm the one who testified at his hearing. And I'm the one whose face he should have recognized if your friend David Chen had bothered to do any research before stealing my identity." The lobby was completely silent now. Nora Morgan had not moved. Her clipboard was hanging at her side, forgotten. Her face was the color of old paper. "I could destroy you." Maxine turned to look at her. "All of you. I have the surveillance footage. I have the financial records. I have the testimony of a federal witness who will be very interested to learn that his old business partner is operating under a false name in Seoul." She paused. Let the words settle. but that's not what I want. The elevator doors opened again, and Beomgyu Seoul stepped into the lobby. He walked across the marble floor in silence. His security stayed by the elevator. His face revealed nothing at all. He stopped beside Maxine, and his presence changed the air in the room the way a drop temperature changes weather. Nora looked at him, at the man whose company could buy the hotel and the block it sat on, at the man who had been watching her small cruelties from 7 floors up for 3 weeks, at the man who everyone in the building spoke about in whispers because the rumors about his reach extended further than logistics contracts, further than delivery robots, into territories no one discussed in polite company. Apologize to her. His voice was quiet, not threatening, not raised, simply final. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're asking me to. I said apologize. To her, now. 14 seconds of silence. Nora Morgan opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The woman who had documented every 2-minute delay, who had dressed down her staff in public, who had smiled while she humiliated the people beneath her, could not find a single word. Maxine watched. She felt no satisfaction. She felt no triumph. Don't. She said it quietly, and Beomgyu turned to look at her. This isn't how I want it. Maxine kept her eyes on Nora. I don't want an apology you forced out of her. I don't want her destroyed because you have the power to destroy people. I want her reported through proper channels. I want the fraud documented and filed and handled the way it should be handled, by people with the authority to handle it. And I want to go back to work. Beomgyu was silent for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Maxine turned and walked toward the service corridor. Behind her, the lobby remained frozen. Nora Morgan still had not spoken. Suyeon-an was clutching her portfolio like a shield, and Beomgyu Seoul was watching her go, with something in his expression that might have been respect or recognition or something else entirely. She did not look back. 6 weeks later, Maxine was cleaning the corner suite at 9:15 in the morning when she heard the door open behind her. Beomgyu was supposed to be in a meeting. She knew his schedule the way she knew the rhythm of her own breathing now. But he was standing in the doorway, still wearing his charcoal suit, holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop 3 blocks away that she had mentioned exactly once. You're early, she said. I canceled. She set down her cloth. He crossed the room and handed her the coffee, and their fingers touched briefly around the cup. He did not pull away. Neither did she. The investigation closed yesterday, he said. Nora Morgan resigned. David Chen's firm lost its Korean contracts. Suyeon-an is cooperating with the fraud inquiry. I know. William Hartley was arrested this morning in Busan. She had not known that. She looked at Beomgyu's face, at the quiet satisfaction there, and understood that this was something he had made happen. Not for power, not for display, for her. Thank you, she said. He shook his head. You did this. I just watched. They stood in the suite that had brought them together, in the hotel where she had been invisible for 14 months. And the distance between them was measured in inches now. His hand found hers, the calluses on his palm, from the year he never explained to reporters, pressed against her skin. Stay, he said. She had learned that dignity was not the absence of struggle. She had learned that being seen was not the same as being rescued. She had learned that the quiet moments after the storm were where the real story began. She stayed. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, she made coffee in the kitchen of a hanok in Bukchon while Beomgyu read contracts at the table. The light through the window was soft. His hand rested on her knee beneath the table, casual and warm. 14 seconds of silence, but this kind was chosen. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me about the moment someone finally saw who you really were. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one.